Hey, good morning, everybody. Glad to be back this morning. My name is Ed Samuel. I'm a career coach with a firm called Sam Nova. We're based in Kennett Square, PA, and serve clients in Greater Philadelphia and across the U.S. You know, this morning we're going to take a look at an area that comes up quite often as a career coach. It's about people thinking about, hey, Ed, I'd like to move into the world of consulting. Can you kind of talk me through what does it take to become a consultant? And some people want to become consultants on a full-time basis, and it's a part of a larger discussion in making a career shift. Maybe, a person's 63, they just got laid off after 20-some years with the last company, and they're thinking, well, maybe it's a time to make a career shift. Other people could be 40 years old and halfway through their career. And on occasion, there could be there's people that I work with that are, just coming out of college who want to do some type of entrepreneurial consulting business. Now, other people, they're working for a firm full time, and they come to me and they say, hey, Ed, I'm working for this company, 40 hours a week, but I want to set up a side consulting practice. Can you help me? So, over the years, I've literally helped dozens and dozens of clients make this shift to either a full-time or part-time consulting practice. And, but for each kind of practice you set up, there are some implications that we're going to kick around this morning. Now, generally, there are a couple of ways you can view consulting. But let's say if you're in job transition, being that, you got let go from a company and, next thing you know, it's 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, and you're approaching 6 months and you're still have not landed that job. Lots of times people, I'll advise my clients, you really need to start doing some consulting. Now, that takes on a couple of different forms. And this is not someone making hey, I want to start a consulting practice right out of the gate. It's something that kind of evolves because they haven't landed that job. And hey, Ed, how do I start I want to kind of move into consulting. So this is one way people kind of think through, moving into consulting. They decide to go work for a larger consulting firm. And if you work for a larger consulting firm, you'll go in as a 1099. Most of the time, you'll be an independent contractor. You're not going to be on their payroll, but you'll go in there and you'll do your work and you'll pay your own taxes, and that's how it's kind of set up. Sometimes a consultant will kind of morph into, you're doing contract work. So sometimes the word's interchangeable between contracting and consulting. But in essence, you're working for another consulting firm. You're doing consulting, but you're working for that consulting firm. They need your skill. They have a client with a problem or a need, and you happen to be the solution. These consulting firms will ask you specifically, what's your pay rate? In other words, what hourly rate do you want to be paid by this consulting firm? And there's a way to formulate that, calculate that. But in general terms, you want your pay rate that you provide a consulting firm to be at your market value whenever possible. But the reason they want your pay rate is because they're the ones that are going to set the bill rate to the clients. And that's not so much your business as it is theirs, because they're the ones doing the selling. They find the clients. Your part is to really deliver for them as a consultant. Now, most of the time, these consulting firms are going to ask you to sign a contract. And when you sign a contract with them, I do have one big caution because I've seen this happen many times at every level of consulting. The contract will specify some type of very broad or deep non-compete. And I've literally seen contracts read that, if you come work for us as a consultant or a contractor, you're forbidden to work, within 360 miles, and to do any kind of consulting for the next 2 years. And these types of terms in a contract really need to be looked at hard, and never sign the contract when it gives you such a statement of a non-compete that it's almost virtually makes you unemployable to do any other kind of work as a contractor anywhere if they decide to let you go or you decide to leave them. I always suggest to clients, talk to an employment attorney and see what they can do. And many times, a lot of these contracts, they're what you call cookie cutter contracts that were given to them from some legal template somewhere. But then again, if you sign it, you could be, really hurting yourself. So sometimes it's worth paying an employment attorney just a little bit of money to review it. And then when you go back and you push back and say you want these terms changed, many of the consulting firms will agree to change them. But be very careful in that particular area. Now, another type of consulting or contract work that you'll hear about is that, hey, come work, you'll go work for a consulting company, and they tell you that this assignment is a contract to hire opportunity. And a contract to hire means that after a certain time frame, the employer may decide to hire you as a full-time W-2 employee. And sometimes it can take, maybe 2 months, sometimes 3 months, and sometimes it could take 6 months, maybe a little bit longer, before that ultimate decision is made to either hire you or not hire you. Now, the good thing about a contract to hire role is that you both get a feel for each other on all fronts. It means that you may not like the firm, you may not like the boss, they may not like you for the best fit for the firm. And then you both, when the contract period is over, you both part ways, you shake hands, you did a good job, but working there long term may not make sense. On the flip side, it could make a whole lot of sense, and that's why people do it. Now, when you're a contractor or doing consulting through a larger firm and that employer wants to hire you, most consulting firms will charge what's known as a conversion fee. And that conversion fee could be up to 45% of the base salary for the position that you're filling. And many times it's a reason why employers will not want to hire you right away within a month or two, because they're going to have to pay that full conversion fee to your consulting firm you're working for. So what happens, and as a rule, the longer you work for the firm as a consultant or as a contractor, that conversion fee will drop over time. Lower, lower, lower. In some consulting firms, once you hit the 6 month or beyond mark, that conversion fee will actually go to 0%. So the reason these consultant firms are charging this conversion fee is because their argument is you acting as a consultant for them, that's their revenue stream. That's their markup. And if an employer was to take that away from you, they need to make up for that revenue loss. That's the logic behind it. Now, the other caution around contract to hire roles, you'll never see, quote, a guarantee. Many times I've seen people come and say, hey, Ed, I got this contract to hire role and it's great. So you're doing consultant, it's contract to hire. But at the end of 4 months, the company's decided not to hire anybody, let alone you. So it's never necessarily guaranteed. But if it truly is a contract to hire, then those words need to be spoken by the consulting firm to you and by the employer to some degree, so that everybody knows up front that you're going to work there under the condition of a contract to hire. So let's go into another aspect of doing consulting work. Let's say you're in job transition. You don't want to go work for a consulting firm. You want to go work for an employer directly. And again, you would work for them as a 1099, not a W-2. You'd have to pay your own taxes. But there's a big difference here. You're going to be working for the employer. That means you need to find the employer. That's the selling that you have to do. You need to close the contract, and then you have to deliver the services. So, and in this particular case, because you're going to do consulting work for an employer directly, you need to set what's known as a bill rate, not your pay rate, but the bill rate. It'll be your cost and a markup that gets you to a competitive bill rate that you want to charge and you believe that employer will accept. So basically, you're marking it up. This type of role also could technically turn into a contract to hire role, potentially. And then because you're representing yourself, there would be no conversion fee per se. Now, when you go it alone and you're not working through a consulting firm or a contracting firm, there's some twists that could occur. So if you go to a larger firm or a mid-sized firm, even a smaller firm, quite honestly, they could ask you questions. Oh, I see you want to do consulting. And you have to be ready for some questions. If they say to you, hey, I need a certificate of insurance for your consulting practice. And I know that for a fact. There's been several firms in this region that made it a requirement of me when I was doing some consulting for them to have that certificate insurance in hand. What happened? And then you're going to say, well, what's the certificate of insurance? Well, that means your consulting practice better have insurance. What happens if they say, hey, show me your website? You're going to have a website. What happens if they say, hey, we're going to need your business tax ID? Or will you only have a social security number to give them? What happens if they ask you for marketing collateral? What happens when they ask you for, contractual terms or a statement of work? Are you going to be prepared to give them those things? Now, if you don't have any of these things in place, you could get marginalized greatly by an employer. And they're kind of scratching their head saying, well, do you really have a consulting practice, or are you kind of working at your kitchen table in a very unofficial manner? Sometimes if you do that with certain firms, they're not going to hire you because you're not legitimate. Now, on the other hand, there are some employers that will hire you, and I've seen it happen. They don't care about any of these things but most of the time when that happens, it's because somebody inside that company knows you, and they're willing to work through the fact that you don't have those things to get you on board to come and start doing some consulting. But for those firms that don't know you and you have no insider vouching for you, it becomes much more problematic. Now, if you decide to set up a consulting practice and really want to legitimize the effort, it may take you, 45 days to do it well, maybe 60 days, but it's no less than 45 days if you do it well. It might cost you $4,000. I've seen it cost anywhere between $4,000 and $7,000 to set it up well. And the other thing that happens is that if you're in job transition and you decide to set up a formal consulting practice while you're unemployed, and let's just say you do land the job with a firm or organization, in the months ahead, then once you've set up this consulting practice, I beg you to not shut your consulting practice down, especially if you've set up a legitimate one. And we'll talk about what it takes to set up a legitimate consulting practice here in a minute. But I did a 3-part series on 1180. I guess it was earlier this year, where I spoke about be very, very careful that you do not put 110% of all your hopes, dreams, and income into one singular firm or organization. And by setting up a consulting practice on the side, it gives you that opportunity to have a little bit of income coming in. And if you do decide to set this up while in job transition, it's something that you can maintain and keep on an ongoing basis, even if you just did a very small project for a couple of hours a month. Continue to use that legal entity that you've set up, that consulting practice that you've set up. Now, what I'm going to do now is just talk to you about, well, Ed, what does it take to set up a legitimized consulting practice? What are some of the things I have to worry about? And I'm going to give you some what I would consider a primer on what it takes to set it up to look and feel and be legitimate. So number one, on a broad sense, write a business plan. It doesn't have to be lengthy, 50 pages, but write down your thoughts. What kind of business do you want to be in? Who are you going to compete against? What kind of income do you want to bring in over the next 5 years? I've written many business plans for other people and for myself, and I could tell you, when you sit down and you spend a day or two writing one out, you have kind of a roadmap in terms of your thought process. You don't necessarily have to do one, because what ends up happening, if you don't do one, you're kind of just learning as you go. You're creating a business plan as you go, but a business plan can be very important. And sometimes a business plan is quite honestly essential if you're trying to raise capital or show an investor what you're doing. Now, the second thing is make sure you have a clear mission and vision. Know where you want to go. Know what your mission is going to be. You do want to form a legal entity, whether it be an LLC or an S Corp. And you can certainly talk to a CPA. But certainly I've worked with many of attorney to help people set up an LLC or an S Corp and starting a practice. And it's a quick way to do it. The other thing you want to do is number 4, and it's tied to working with an attorney, is make sure you hone in and lock in on a legal name. If it's, Smith Consulting or Smith Accounting Services, does one already exist? And you may have to fool with that a little bit to get a proper legal name nailed down, and that becomes your business name. Number 5, build a simple logo. I know a person that does this for many of people. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money at all, but have a logo that kind of represents who you are and what you bring to the table with your consulting practice. You're going to need to write a bio. A bio becomes more important than your resume when you're running a consulting practice, because people want to know everything about you, but they don't need a resume because they're not necessarily going to be hiring you. They're hiring you to come in as a consultant, do work, and leave. But, we have written many, many bios for different people over the years, especially those who are going in consulting practices. Now, number 7 is sometimes takes the longest. What services are you going to deliver? I'm not a big fan of making it so broad, like, I will do IT services. Be specific and show some depth. What are you truly good at? What do you think people would pay money for because you're so darn good at it? Think about, what you've done over the years with different firms. Think about whether you're going to have some type of an assessment process, whether it's going to be free, whether you want to charge a nominal fee. And then based on that assessment, do you want to come forward with recommendations? It's kind of like what the financial advisors do. They come in, they sit down with you, they assess your financial situation, and then they come back with recommendations. But you really need to have an idea, because the next point is hard to do unless you have an idea what you're going to be delivering as a service, and that's build a simple and effective website. I work with a person exclusively that builds really simple consulting websites He's helped many of my clients. It doesn't have to be expensive, but it certainly starts to legitimize, who you are, and you have to have content to put into that website. Now, the other neat thing about it is if you have a website, you have a logo, then what you can do is you could put the website and logo on LinkedIn and have a landing page. And that way, publicly on LinkedIn, you really legitimized yourself a bit because they see a logo, they see you could click on it, and then boom, it goes right to your website. The other thing you want to make sure on your website, I want to go back a minute, make sure on your website you have some testimonials of some real people where they've gone public with the work that you've done in the past. Those testimonials are huge, especially when you're launching a consulting practice. Number 10, go get that business insurance to protect yourself, but also for those clients who you'll be surprised will then say, hey, look, if you want to come in, I'm more than happy to work with you, but please give us a certificate of insurance. And that means you have to actually go to your insurance broker and ask them to cut a certificate of insurance for that particular client that you're going to be working with. And they expect that, to be sent to them fairly quickly. Are you going to have an office? Are you going to rent a space? Are you going to have a virtual office? Are you going to go to one of the larger shared office locations and get a day office to use there? And then are you going to have a 1 to 2 page marketing flyer that you can send to somebody? So when somebody says, hey, Ed, send me something. Hey, Jim, hey, Sue, send me something about your consulting practice. You're going to have something ready to go to send. The other thing, it may seem like it may never be needed, but I always like to have it, have that 10-page PowerPoint slide deck, if you will, ready to go. So if a business owner said, hey, my team, is meeting and there's 7 people in the room, can you come in and present to us what you're going to do for us and what you do, how you do it, and why we should consider you? Do you have that ready to go? So it's not just, a 1-page or 2-page marketing flyer, but it's an entire 10-page slide deck of what you do that's been very effective with my clients in the past. Number 14, when you start your consulting practice, you have to target clients. And you always target people that know you and engage them. What's your plan to engage them? And once you, talk to the people that you know, then it gets harder because now you have to go talk to people that you don't know. And what's your plan to engage them? And this is all about building your practice. Now, if a smaller client says, hey, I'd love to work with you, please send me your contract. Will you have a contract in place to send them? Or, something that's going to spell out your legal terms and conditions, your bill rate, your payment schedule, your statement of work. What happens, how do we cancel this contract? What happens if there's a conflict? How about non-payment? Now, this is something the attorney can help you with, but you got to have a contract in place in case it's asked for. And of course, this is like fundamental, but you got to have a business card, something with your letterhead on it, including your invoice, making sure that it's all consistent. And then lastly, you might want to think about who you're going to partner with. I helped a person put together a healthcare audit practice, consulting practice, but a big part of the audit process is to really go deep into medical billing. That person did not know medical billing. So what this person ended up doing was teaming with a couple of people that really knew medical billing. So when they were talking to a client and it came to medical billing, they were able to lean on someone as part of their consulting practice to help them go in and deliver for that client. There's many other examples that I could go through, but that's a very important one. Who do you need to team with, whether it be an administrative type of person or whether it be a specialist? Now, I just covered 17 different areas to think about when building out a consulting practice. if you really want to legitimize yourself. It can take between 45 to 60 days to set up, but you need to sit down with somebody and have them guide you, walk you through it whenever possible. It can really help. And there's so much more I can talk about when it comes to consulting, but I want to give you a bit of a flavor this morning of some of the things you need to be thinking about if you want to build out a consulting practice for the very first time and make it a legitimate practice. Net of that, you do take some chance by not building it out and working for an employer directly. And then net of that, go work for a consulting firm and they've done all the heavy lifting for you. And you're going in as an independent contractor, and certainly you don't have to legitimize yourself at that point because the consulting practice has already done that for you. So we're just about out of time. So let's wrap things up. Please join us again on our next Optimize Your Career program on Saturday, September 21st. We will be talking about firms that offer flex jobs that allow you to work from home. And joining us will be an industry-leading expert in this area. This is Ed Samuel, career coach with Sam Nova. Our website is www.samnovainc.com, SAMNOVAINC.com. If you'd like to reach me with a question or comment, email me at esamuel, ESAMUEL, at samnovainc.com, or call our main number at 610-274-8214. Hey, make it a great weekend. So long for now, and God bless.